Friday was a busy day for me, but I got to watch two films that really couldn't be more different, but also, funny enough, both are based on real life and both tackle the idea of success. So, to save us all time, I've included both reviews here for you. King Richard is in theaters and HBO Max, and Tick Tick Boom is on Netflix and in limited release in theaters. Now, I'm going to put the time codes in the description, so if you only want to watch one review, you can skip right to it. Otherwise, let's dive in. First up, Will Smith stars in King Richard, playing real-life father and coach Richard Williams. He's the dad of Venus and Serena Williams, who, if you're somehow unfamiliar with those names, they're two of the greatest tennis players to ever step foot on the court. Let me start off by saying that this film is a long one. I mean, it's just short of 2.5 hours. But I didn't feel the length too much because of how the story was gripping me. We follow the Williams family with Richard as the focus. Now, Will Smith is able to capture and create a character who can be both utterly sympathetic and entirely off-putting in the same sentence. Now, I don't know the real Richard, obviously, but what I love about this movie is how they unapologetically approach him. We get to see the bad with the good. The man's not perfect, which Will Smith's performance captures, but he's also not despicable. I mean, he's flawed, most certainly, but engaging, fierce, and passionate too. And it's his heart that is so redeeming. Despite making tons of mistakes, his passion for his kids always shines through. Smith absolutely kills it in the role. He disappeared at times throughout, where I stopped seeing him as the actor and I only saw the character. His emotion translated through the screen so well, and when that was combined with tension from the story, the movie created scenes that were slowly increasing my blood pressure just by the suspense. And the crazy thing is that at any point, I could have just looked up what the outcome of a match was, or what happened in a certain scenario. But I was captivated by what was going on. There was no way I was going to break myself out of what was on the screen. But it's not just Smith that excels in this story. I mean, we have Tony Goldwyn and John Bernthal who play Venus and Serena's coaches, and I love the exasperation that they display, along with the patience and enthusiasm. I mean, both of them help to speak out loud some of the thoughts and feelings that I was having about Richard in certain moments. But as good as they are, I really enjoyed watching Sania Sidney as Venus and Demi Singleton as Serena. They are engaging and very charismatic. Each of the characters is called upon to be stronger than their age, and I think they pulled it off convincingly. There are some key moments where they both shine, showing their vulnerability, but with inner strength that illustrates the powerhouse athletes that they actually are. Because this has tennis as the backdrop, we can expect to see some of the sport. Now, I'm not a sports guy, let alone a fan of tennis, but the way they capture the matches I thought was engaging and even stress-inducing in a good way. I became fully invested in the matches, even though we don't watch the full back and forth of every play. We see just the serve or return and then the announcement of the score, and that was enough to create excitement. And I don't think you need to be a fan of the sport either, or be knowledgeable about the Williams sisters. The story does a good job of giving us the right amount of background on them, and then, because this is Richard's story, we get a ton of development over the course of the film on him throughout different conversations, and many of which are quite emotional. The tennis aspect, though, especially matches, are well shot and designed to maximize the excitement, tension, and drama that can be contained within the sport. The camera work is effective in putting us close enough to the action to see the players' strengths and endurance, but also not so close that we can't take in the quickness of their moves and the suspense of the plays. Something that stood out to me that despite this really focusing on Richard, the narrative also gives more focus to Venus than Serena. I'm glad though that there are a few key moments that illustrate how Richard and others know how powerful of a player that Serena actually is. There are some sequences that work to illustrate the passion and dedication that it takes to succeed, as well as showcasing the seemingly never-ending drive that Richard has. But there were a few times where this also felt a bit repetitive. And I don't think they detracted too much from the story, nor did they bore me, but they do add to the overall length of the film. There's so much to like in this story because we get to see a real-life tale of hope and perseverance executed by imperfect people. The film shows us characters who can't believe in anything but success, which then fuels and propels them against the odds. So overall, King Richard showcases why Will Smith is a powerhouse actor who can display the full gamut of emotions in anyone he embodies. He skillfully portrays a real-life character in a way that shows the flaws but also the strengths to build out a pretty relatable person who fights for his dreams and his kids' future. The story is inspiring and emotional with excellent performances from many of the supporting characters. And this captures the excitement, upset, and suspense of top-tier athletics in a way that can appeal and be accessible to anyone. There's no sex or nudity with a bunch of profanity and some violence. I give King Richard 4.5 out of 5 couches. Okay, up next is another film based on a real person, but this time it's a Netflix musical called Tick, Tick, Boom. On the cusp of his 30th birthday, a promising young theater composer named Jonathan Larson navigates love, friendship, and the pressures of life as an artist in New York City. Andrew Garfield stars as Larson and is wonderful at showcasing a frustrated but hopeful playwright. Now, I wasn't familiar with Larson or really his work until I found out that he created the groundbreaking musical Rent. But this movie is based on the musical of the same name that Larson created through what we see as blood, sweat, and many, many tears. This is also the feature directorial debut of Lin-Manuel Miranda, and with his musical background, he creates a unique execution for this. The story that we follow is actually the musical Tick, Tick, Boom that tells the story of Larson's journey. While most of the settings are within Larson's cramped apartment as he tries to finish a song for his upcoming workshop, we sometimes travel to the diner where he works part-time and around New York. As the story develops and key moments are unveiled in Larson's life, the settings transform from real life to those that resemble Broadway plays in the grandest scale. In one scene during a Sunday brunch, the diner breaks out into a who's who of musical theater, which not only contains a moving song, but also shows an exciting way to move through the cramped space of the diner that resolves with a fantastical finale. Garfield has a pretty good singing voice, and I really enjoyed his performance. He's also then backed up by some phenomenal singers with powerful voices. I mean, two of the huge standouts are Vanessa Hudgens and Joshua Henry. They accompany Garfield during the reenactment of the stage rendition of Tick, Tick, Boom, but also get to show off their vocal skills during Larson's workshop. During the stage rendition, there's one song that Garfield and Hudgens perform together that is very catchy and moving, but the execution is visually creepy and unsettling. Now, I don't know if it was meant to be a little creepy, but they're singing on the stage with this driving, almost country rock score, and their movements somewhat mimic puppets. Each of them have these jerky and staccato movements that are in sync, and they sometimes mirror each other. But the thing that makes it super bothersome is the way they keep their eyes just painfully wide open. Especially Hudgens, because her eyes are so bright and then they just shine. But despite the creepy visuals, the song is still wonderful and the scene is very moving. Now, the pace of this story is very driven, mimicking the looming countdown that haunts Larson through the course of the film. And the self-imposed urgency to finish his musical by his 30th birthday creates wonderful story and character tensions. This deadline helps to propel the story from moment to moment, and although I did get a little lost with how much time was left for Larson's deadline, the sentiment was always present, many times with this subtle ticking in the background to reinforce the theme and the title. Garfield is at times sympathetic, and other times he's immature and tantrumy, but all throughout, I wanted to see more and more of him. I began to fall in love with the character and his struggle, despite not always liking him or agreeing with him. The story is mostly melancholy, but there is a hopefulness that's ever present, which I found inspiring. Now, two additional standouts in the cast are Alexandra Shipp and Robin De Jesus. Their characters help to soften and challenge Larson, and the chemistry between them all can be emotional and infectious. The styling of this movie took me a few minutes to get into sync with. I mean, it's not like it was off-putting or executed poorly. I just think that because I went into this not really knowing what to expect, my brain took a little bit to get used to the pace. Now, because Larson also wrote the musical Rent, this movie pulls in some feelings and stylings of that. And most of the time it's in small ways, like the way a song is sung or the beats and cadence of a musical number. And I'm not sure if that's just an homage to Larson by Miranda, or if it's also present in the musical that this is based on. But either way, it's cool to hear. Now, obviously, this movie gives way more story building than what is portrayed on the stage, and I think that's helpful in giving us insight and context into Larson's mindset. But it also allows for some compelling drama. Parts are also frustrating as we watch decisions and outbursts that are hurtful, arrogant, and even narcissistic. But these are also traits of someone driven to succeed, knowing their goal and doing whatever it takes to achieve it, even if they're the only ones that believe it will happen. I find it interesting how Larson is going up against an internal deadline, feeling like he's running out of time, and Miranda has chosen to tell this story after he created Hamilton, with a focus on a character who went about his life up against some internal deadline, living like he was running out of time. I'm curious at how much of an influence Larson's real life was on Miranda's career and his writings. Now, not all of the songs absolutely clicked with me, but for the most part, they were melodic and engaging. And I think what's most impressive is that Garfield is actually singing his songs. There were a bunch of them that had me grooving along, which is exactly what I want if I'm taking in a musical. I want to connect with the songs, whether that be through the theme, lyrics, or just simply the music. And I did connect with many of them. I love how inspiring this is, especially to showcase a person pursuing their dream, going up against all kinds of odds of potential failure. The movie is just under 2 hours, but it felt a little longer than that. I think some of that, though, is due to a little unevenness in the pacing. There are portions that move quickly, almost blurring the timeline, and then others that slow way down to make the story almost stand still. And while it didn't hurt the narrative overall, I did feel the ebb and the flow of that pacing. I enjoyed a lot of the cinematography in this as the camera will sweep around scenes, capturing some feels of a Broadway musical, but also getting us into intimate spaces where we can see a tear roll down a face or the slight smirk of success. Sometimes the edits were a little quick and they were abrupt, but they became effective when used in conjunction with a faster paced song, contributing to the energy and the drive. Now, because I saw this a few nights ago, I've had some time to marinate on how I ultimately feel about it. When I finished the film, I enjoyed it, but I didn't really have any desire to revisit it. And that's not speaking to the quality, it's just that it didn't leave me feeling like I wanted to live in that world again. But now, after a couple of days and then rewatching the trailer, the music has me tapping my foot and wanting to experience at least some parts of the movie again. And really, I think it's just the music that I want to relive. So probably what I'm going to do is just give the soundtrack a listen so I can just hit the points that I want. Overall, Tick, Tick, Boom is a moving musical with an exceptional performance by Andrew Garfield. He embodies the tortured artist who's chasing his dream and driven to succeed. Lin-Manuel Miranda's feature directorial debut draws upon his expertise in theater, drawing out the musical best of the performers and framing the scenes in ways that can contain a lot of chaos but still maintain the correct character focus. I would have liked a more consistent pace to the overall story, but the narrative creates a palpable urgency for the man who feels like he's running out of time. And when that's combined with the songs, it creates an engaging drama. There's not really any sex, no nudity, a lot of profanity, and no violence. I give Tick, Tick, Boom 3.5 out of 5 couches. So have you seen either of these films? I'd love to know your thoughts on either or both of them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.